Good morning, members. This is roll call for the 16th day of session 2025, February the 4th of the 68th Wyoming Legislature. Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Convening roll call for day 16, Tuesday, February 4th, 2025. Allemand. Andrew. Angelos. Banks. Bear. Brady. Bratton. Brown, Gary. Brown, Landon. Byron. Campbell, Elisa. Campbell, Kevin. Chestick. Clouston. Connolly. Davis. Eklund. Erickson. Filer. Geringer. Guggenmoss. Haroldson. Harshman. Heiner. Heft. Jarvis. Johnson. Kelly. Knapp. Larson Lloyd. Larson JT. Lawley. Lean. Locke. Lucas. McCann. Nicholas. Ottman. Pendergraft. Posey. Provenza. Riggins. Rodriguez-Williams. Schmid. Sherwood. Singh. Smith. Storer. Strock. Stivar. Tarver. Thayer. Washut. Wasserberger. Wasserberger. Webb. Weber. Worf. Williams. Winter. Wiley. Yin. Mr. Speaker. Storer. Harshman. Who? Heiner.
Oh, Ag must still be out. Okay, all right. Well, but Carly's here. That's interesting. All right, fellow members and guests, please rise and welcome Pastor Tommy Miller from Faith Baptist Church here in Cheyenne, Wyoming, to lead us in the opening prayer. Welcome, Mr. Miller.
Let us pray. Our Father, your word exhorts that supplications and prayers and intercessions and giving of thanks be made for all men, but especially for those that are in authority, that we may lead quiet and peaceful lives in all godliness and honesty. For this is good and acceptable in the sight of our God and our Savior, who have all men to be saved, to come into the knowledge of the truth. For there is one God and one mediator between God and men, the man Christ Jesus. Father, in Jesus' name today, we beseech thee that you might touch this body, these men and women, as they discuss and put forth ideas of budget and or legislation, Father, to make rules for our state. And God, we pray that though they have various ideas and backgrounds, you might give them a spirit of unity and cooperation, that today they might seek wisdom from above and do what's best and what's right for our state and for these people. And Father, we thank you for the blessings that you've bestowed upon us this day and that you'll continue to bestow. And God, I pray a blessing on each and every one of these for their service to the public. And we ask your blessing now in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor Miller. Fellow members and guests, join me in the salute to our flag. Stay in your seats. Don't go anywhere. do the kind thing and just wave quietly and casually to those around you. Extend welcomes and good mornings and glad to see you. We even got to hear, I'm here from Representative Stivar, so he's here, and several others that have been gone. Welcome back, but let's stay on the mend. So we'll call that good for play ball this morning. Chief Clerk, go ahead, try it some more.
Davis. Eklund. Ottman. $55 present, 7 excused, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Chief Clerk. Next, we need our Journal Committee report. Chief, reading clerk.
Your Journal Committee reports that the Journal of February 3rd, 2025 has been read and recommends it be approved. Representatives Jarvis and Posey.
Thank you, reading clerk. No messages from the Senate and no reports from standing committees as last recorded here. So we're going to move on, ladies and gentlemen, to bills on second reading. We are at that order of business on second reading, of bills on second reading. The first bill for our consideration is House Bill 97.
House Bill 97, sponsored by Appropriations, Property Conveyances Near Critical Infrastructure, and Act relating to Homeland Security.
House Bill 97, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Next bill for our consideration, House Bill 132.
House Bill 132, sponsored by Representative Smith, Annual Permits for Specified Commercial Loads, and Act relating to motor vehicles.
House Bill 132, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Next bill for our consideration, House Bill 148.
House Bill 148, sponsored by Representative Rodriguez Williams, University of Wyoming Governance, Elected Trustees, and Act relating to the University of Wyoming Board of Trustees.
House Bill 148, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Next bill for our consideration, House Bill 154.
House Bill 154, sponsored by Representative Brady, false voting amendments, and Act relating to elections.
House Bill 154, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Next bill for our consideration, House Bill 166.
House Bill 166, sponsored by Representative Bratton, State Auditor Payment Transparency, an act relating to the administration of government.
House Bill 166, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Next bill for our consideration, House Bill 183.
House Bill 183, sponsored by Representative Heiner, net metering amendments, an act relating to electric utilities.
House Bill 183, having been read two separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Next bill for our consideration, House Bill 188.
House Bill 188, sponsored by Representative Yin, two families, one nanny, an act relating to child care facilities.
House Bill 188, having been read two separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Next bill for our consideration, House Bill 189.
House Bill 189, sponsored by Representative Lean, harmful communication, minors, an act relating to crimes and offenses.
House Bill 189, having been read two separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Next bill for our consideration, House Bill 226.
House Bill 226, sponsored by Representative Campbell, license plates, search and rescue council, an act relating to motor vehicle license plates.
We have amendments. Representative Yin.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I respectfully withdraw second reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 226.
Amendment has been asked to be rescinded or rejected. Any objection from the members of the House? Seeing no objection, the amendment has been removed. House Bill 226, having been read two separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Next bill for our consideration, House Bill 227. We have amendments.
House
ahead.
Bill 227, sponsored by Representative Angelos, executive order, time limitations, an act relating to the administration of government.
Thank you, Reading Clerk. Representative Chestick. Second reading amendment number 1 to 227, please, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby move second reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 227. And this is simply a clarifying amendment. Sometimes I feel my role here in the body is to check grammar and check to make sure that words do what they're supposed to do. This relates to the issue I raised during Committee of the Whole yesterday. The fact that the word governor is used to refer to two different people, the same word refers to two different people on line 1, on or page 1, lines 12 and 14. This simply clarifies that it's the existing governor that is going to the existing governor has the right to revoke prior governor's standing orders, previous governor's orders. So just clarifying, I think it's intended to be friendly and intended to effectuate the intent of the bill.
Thank you, Representative Chestick. Any members? Representative Angelos, first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes, this is a friendly amendment. I worked alongside the representative with it, and I appreciate the clarification. Sometimes words are tricky. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Any others for their first time? Seeing none, second time. Back to the bringer. Call the question. Question being called. Members, you're being asked to vote on second reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 227. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed, no. The amendment has been adopted. House Bill 227, having been read two separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Next bill for our consideration, House Bill 238.
House Bill 238, sponsored by Representative Johnson, ballot harvesting prohibition, an act relating to elections.
We have amendments. Representative Provenza.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move second reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 238. Folks, yesterday I talked about the concern that if your ballot is tossed and not tabulated, that folks should be made aware of that and given the opportunity to cast their vote. This amendment does that. This amendment says that the county clerk shall provide notice to any person whose ballot is not tabulated due to a violation of this section and shall allow the person 7 days from the date of notification of rejected ballot to cast a substitute ballot. regardless of whether that period will extend. And then I have an except as provided by statute 22-9-113. This amendment simply just makes sure that you can cast your ballot if it has been found to have been thrown away.
Thank you, Representative Provenza. Any members for their first time? Representative Storr, first time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just ask the bringer of this amendment to clarify whether we need to identify that as a spoiled ballot by the judge as required in statute or not before they could be given a new ballot. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Any others for their first time? First time, Representative Knapp, Chairman Knapp, first time.
Mr. Chairman, I would resist this amendment. We'll probably be coming with a third reading amendment that will clarify that the clerk may contact for this reason. So for this, I would resist this amendment.
Thank you, Chairman Knapp. Any others for their first time? Representative Larson, Lloyd, first time.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I appreciate the last commenter, the good chairman of corporations, but unless we know what that third reading amendment is going to do, we need to know that in order whether or not we support this or not, please.
Any other members for their first time? Representative Chestick for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Also, it sounds like the third reading amendment that may be coming is different from this one. This one is a shall. The one that's coming is a may. I prefer shall. So I think we should support this amendment, and I encourage an aye vote.
Thank you, Representative Chestick. Any others for your first time? First, are you Representative Wharf for your first time?
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, thank you. I guess the question I have to the bringer of the amendment is how would we know what ballots have been lost? I don't see any, I don't know of any tracking mechanism that exists. If it was spoiled, lost in the mail, I don't know how that would ever be determined. Can you tell me how you think that could happen? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Representative Wharf. Any others for their first time? No others? Second time? Second time? Okay, back to the bringer. Representative Provenza.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To answer that last question, this bill makes it so that the county clerk can say that can not tabulate your ballot because they've determined that it is by a person who's not deemed worthy to do so, i.e. a family member or someone who works at the nursing home. So they know the county clerk is the person who's saying, I'm not going to tabulate your ballot. So they are the person who will be tasked with contacting the person whose original ballot it belongs to say, we're not going to uphold your right to vote in this case because we don't like who brought the ballot. What this amendment does is says that they shall let that person know that their ballot is not being tabulated, that their right to vote is being infringed upon and not being cast. That is the purpose of the amendment, to protect our right to vote, to ensure that if the county clerk has determined that I haven't sent the right person with my ballot, that I get the opportunity to still cast my vote. This bill, as currently written, does not care. It just says we aren't going to tabulate your vote. And I would submit to you that we should care that people do not know that their vote is not being counted, and they should be made aware and given the opportunity to do so. So, Mr. Speaker, according to 12-4, I would ask for a recorded vote. Thank you. Please vote aye.
We'll need 1 second for that to happen. Representative Chestick is the second. Members, you're being asked to cast your vote on second reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 238. Chief Clerk will call the roll.
Allemand? Excused. Andrew? Angelos? Banks? Bear? Brady? Bratton? Brown Gary? Brown Landon? Byron? Campbell Elisa? Campbell Kevin? Repeat. Chestick? Clouston? Connolly? Davis? Eklund? Erickson? Filer? Geringer? Guggenmoss? Haroldson? Harshman? Heiner? Heft? Jarvis? Johnson? Kelly? Knapp? Larson Lloyd? Larson JT? Lawley? Lean? Locke? Lucas? McCann? Nicholas? Ottman? Pendergraft? Posey? Provenza? Riggins, excused. Rodriguez Williams? Schmid? Sherwood? Singh? Smith? Storr? Strock? Stivar? Tarver? Thayer? Washut? Wasserberger? Webb? Weber? Worf? Williams? Winter? Wiley? Yin? Mr. Speaker, are there any changes? Are there any changes? Angelos? Are there any changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 26 aye, 33 no, 3 excused.
The amendment has not been adopted. House Bill 238 having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a 3rd time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Moving on to bills on 3rd reading consent. We are at that order of business of bills on 3rd reading and final pass. Oh. Where's my new list then? Okay, next bill for our consideration, House Bill 242.
House Bill 242, sponsored by Representative Tarver, manufacturers and dealers of new trailers, changes, and act relating to motor vehicles.
House Bill 242 having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a 3rd time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Next bill for our consideration, House Bill 279.
House Bill 279, sponsored by Representative Nicholas, property tax exemptions, order of application, and act relating to property taxation.
House Bill 279 having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a 3rd time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Next bill for our consideration, House Bill 293.
House Bill 293, sponsored by Representative Bear, repealing the School Foundation Program Reserve Account and act relating to school finance.
House Bill 293 having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a 3rd time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Next bill for our consideration, House Bill 316.
House Bill 316, sponsored by Management Council, School Finance Model Recalibration 2 and act relating to school finance.
House Bill 316 having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a 3rd time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Now, moving on. We are at that order of business of bills on 3rd reading and final passage. Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move the consent list for 3rd reading consisting of 2 bills, House Bill 54 and House Bill 270.
Thank you, Majority Floor Leader. Any member would like to remove any of these bills? Representative Yen.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I would like to pull 270 off, so I would suppose no consent list.
Yep, no, that leaves us with one, so we do not have a consent list. Thank you, Representative Yen. So, moving on to regular consent.
First one,
Let me move these over.
there's no amendments on it. Everything went off consent. Goes to third reading regular. Yep.
Excuse me, we're at that order of business of bills on third reading and final passage. The first bill for our consideration is House Bill 54.
House Bill 54 is sponsored by Judiciary, Chancery Court Judges, District and Circuit Court Assistants, an act relating to courts being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
House Bill 54 having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall the bill pass? Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Allemand? Andrew? Angelos? Banks? Excused, Bear? Brady? Bratton? Brown, Gary? Brown, Landon? Byron? Campbell, Elisa? Campbell, Kevin? Chestick? Clauston? Connolly? Davis? Eklund? Erickson? Filer? Geringer? Guggenmoss? Haroldson? Harshman? Heiner? Heft? Jarvis? Johnson? Kelly? Knapp? Larson Lloyd? Larson JT? Lawley? Lean? Locke? Lucas? McCann? Nicholas? Ottman? Pendergraft? Posey? Provenza? Riggins, excused. Rodriguez Williams? Schmid? Sherwood? Singh? Smith? Storer? Strock? Stivar? Tarver? Thayer? Repeat? Washut? Wasserberger? Webb? Weber? Wharf? Williams? Winter? Wiley? Yin? Mr. Speaker, are there any changes? Are there any changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 58 aye, 1 no, 3 excused.
House Bill 54 having received affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the House, House Bill 54 has passed the House. Next bill for our consideration will be House Bill 168.
House Bill 168, sponsored by Representative Eklund, cultivating meat prohibition, an act relating to public health and safety, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
We have amendments. Representative Singh.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move third reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 68, and I ask for your favorable consideration. Folks, after meeting consistently with the bringer of this bill, we've asked that you consider adding the words "for human consumption" after page 1, line 2, page 2, line 14, and page 3, line 1. And this specifies that this bill is specifically concerning for human consumption. And the last thing that I would want to do in our great state is to somehow stifle innovation when it comes to the future of technology. And though it is spooky, it does sound scary. Folks, we are moving into a new age of digital, or of innovation in general, and that broadens the scope into biology. We have a technology that is crispier than most, and well, I would hate to see that because of laws made today that we would stifle the ability of those technological innovators to pave the future for not only our country, for the world, in our state. And I think that our state, we are able to lead the way in a lot of these innovations, and so I ask for your support in this amendment.
Thank you, Representative Singh. Representative Eklund for your first time.
Mr. Speaker, I do consider this a friendly amendment, and it better addresses what I was trying to do. We're taking care of the health and safety of people, I believe, and yet it doesn't stifle innovation, and I appreciate the thoughtfulness of the bringer of the amendment.
Thank you, Representative Eklund. Any others for their first time? Second time? Back to the bringer. Representative Singh.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And just to clarify that this would prohibit, as the bill is written, this would prohibit the use of any of these cells for human consumption, protecting our agricultural industries. Thank you.
Members, you have been House Bill, what? Ooh, we got another one. Members, you're being asked to vote on third reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 168. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed, no. The amendment has been adopted. Members, we have another third reading amendment number 2 to House Bill 168. Representative Yin, please.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I move third reading amendment number 2 to House Bill 168. Members, I apologize for bringing it the last minute. I drafted this and I completely spaced this morning on filing it. So members, what this does is it makes it so any state agency or governmental entity is prohibited from using this cultivated or this product, but free people can still choose to do what they want, right? So this separates it out, so we still have the freedom as people to make those choices if we so wish, but as a government, we're saying we're not going to participate in this. And so that's all it does. It just restricts the government while still letting free people make their own choices.
Thank you, Representative Yin. Representative Eklund for your first time.
Mr. Speaker, this amendment I don't like, and I think it takes away from what the bill is trying to do, which is keep Wyoming people safe as we can with a product we don't know much about. So anyway, I would request that this body resist the amendment.
Thank you, Representative Eklund. Any others for their first time? First time? Second time? Members, you are voting on third reading amendment number 2 to House Bill 168. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed, no. The amendment has not been adopted. House Bill 168 having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall this bill pass? Chief Clerk will please call the roll.
Allemand, excused. Andrew? Angelos? Banks? Excused. Bear? Brady? Bratton? Brown Gary? Brown Landon? Byron? Campbell Elisa? Campbell Kevin? Chestick? Clouston? Connolly? Davis? Eklund? Erickson. Feiler. Geringer. Guggenmoss. Haroldson. Harshman. Heiner. Heft. Jarvis. Johnson. Kelly. Knapp. Larson Lloyd. Larson JT. Lawley. Lean. Locke. Lucas. McCann. Nicholas. Ottman. Pendergraft. Posey. Provenza. Riggins, excused. Rodriguez Williams. Schmid. Sherwood. Singh. Repeat. Smith. Storer. Strock. Stivar. Stivar. Tarver. Thayer. Washut. Wasserberger. Webb. Weber. Worf. Williams. Winter. Wiley. Yin. Mr. Speaker, are there any changes? Angelos, no to aye. Campbell Kevin, no to aye. Clauston, no to aye. Provenza, aye to no. Larson JT, no to aye. Byron, no to aye. Brown, Landon, no to aye. Stivar, no to aye. Further changes? Further changes? Closing vote? Vote closed. 42 aye, 17 no, 3 excused.
House Bill 168, having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the House, House Bill 168 has passed the House. Next bill for our consideration will be House Bill 271.
House Bill 271, sponsored by Representative Baer. Common School Account, Spending Policy Amount, an act relating to the investment of state funds being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
We have amendments. Representative Clauston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I bring third reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 271. Ladies and gentlemen, this is trying to find a bit of a compromise, trying to kind of ramp the way we do this funding or decrease in funding. So for the first year, it would be a 4.75% versus the 4.5%. The second year and thereafter would go to 4.5%. This will give us a way to evaluate what this change does, and instead of taking 24 million is the estimate, it would be 12 million from the foundation. I ask for your favorable support.
Thank you, Representative Clauston. Representative Baer, for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and for the amendment. I've been resistant to most of these amendments to change the trajectory of our spending. I am going to be in support of this one. I'm not sure the amendment will last through the process, but I do believe that there's nothing wrong with taking a moment to pause, and that's what this amendment does, and it's reasonable. On and for the amendment.
Thank you, Representative Baer. Any others for their first time? Representative Harshman, first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, just so we know when this amendment passes, if it passes, and we get a vote on this bill in a few minutes, just so we know kind of what we're voting on. And this fund goes right to our schools, this 5%. And the account made 14% last year. We're going to be with the bill we just passed, eliminating the SFRA to 6X. It's going to be one of the key sources of revenue now for our schools. And it's actually every state funds schools with property taxes. The issue in our state is who pays property taxes? Minerals pays over half the property taxes on that extraction. And so the most volatile government service we have in our state, whether it's prisons, university, Department of Health, or K-12 funding, the most volatile service that we provide is K-12 education, because it is based on the most volatile revenue that we have, and that is property tax, because it's paid by minerals. Other states, it's not that way. It's residential and commercial, and it stays pretty steady, and it's a steady source for schools. So here we have this steady source of income for our schools that was set up in our Constitution. Constitution says every dime should go to the schools. We've done this trust where we backfill and we're only given 5% of the 5-year rolling average. Do any of you, before we vote on this, know what this cut to revenue is? How much is it? I'm looking at heads, people are shaking, I don't know. Well, it's $25 million a year. It's $25 million a year, and so a handout, Mr. Speaker, that I used last week, how much is $25 million? Okay, let's just start with that first school district in Johnson County, number 1. Funds their entire district. That's what $25 million will do. It'll also fund your district, Cook County, number 1. Fund your entire county school system. And you're going to pull that rug out from under. Bighorn, Washakie, Laramie 2, Sheridan 1, Platte 1, Sublet 1, Carbon, Niobrara, Fremont, Weston. Those are all the districts. That's enough money to fund those districts. And so how are you going to make it up? How are you going to make this amount up? Because we're pulling a revenue stream off that the people of Wyoming have contributed to since statehood for our people now. So how are we going to make it up, Mr. Speaker? And so that's, I think, as this amendment passes and we institute then, and then that we're asked to vote on a $25 million cut to our schools of the most stable revenue source it has, how are we going to make it up? So this fiscal cliff that, and I guess I read a press release now, we got a new, I don't know if it's a new sheriff or a new representative. I don't know how that works, but I'll tell you what, you better keep your fingers crossed for high oil prices, because that's what pays the property taxes, folks, and to educate 97% of our kids. There's no reason to set this fiscal calamity up. It's the best funding source we have on the education side of the budget. So when the bill comes up and you're sitting in your chair, think about your district back home you're representing that you're going to pull the rug out. Oh yeah, I know we'll fund it, but it'll come from the LSRA. See, that's how this will, the end game on this. And that, the law, if you read that, the LSRA will backfill until it gets to 500 million. And then that rug gets pulled out. And then we have special sessions and we have more lawsuits, and then the court order will take over and raise property taxes on everybody. And I wonder how many will be held accountable for this vote. This is a real deal. This isn't about no little plastic badge or anything else. This is a real deal. And so please vote no on this. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Any other representatives for the first time? Representative Jarvis, first time.
Thank you, Speaker. So being one of the few people that showed up to the school board dinner the other night, I can tell you wholeheartedly that it is a community that typically doesn't vote. So in your primaries, when you're looking at those percentages on who showed up to vote, that community is typically not a community that is present. But I can tell you, they are wide awake. They are watching. And when you start reducing spending in a place that our state has been succeeding for no reason other than we just want to create a quote-unquote crisis, so people think we've got financial problems. We have no financial problems. We are wanting to reduce spending. You are reducing spending in the wrong places in the wrong way, and they are wide awake.
Thank you, Representative. Any others for their first time? First time? None. Second time? Second time to the bringer? Representative Clouston, if you see fit.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for the discussion on the amendment and somewhat on the bill. Again, this amendment is a kind of a soft landing. It's going to give us a year. We're not going to take 24 or 25 million. It'll be 12 million. And then next year we can evaluate what the effect of that was with this amendment. So on for the amendment.
Thank you, Representative. Body, you are voting on third reading amendment number 2 to House Bill 271. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed, no. Division. Chairs in doubt. All those in favor, please stand. Thank you, members. You may sit. The amendment has been adopted. 37. All right, members, we have one more amendment for House Bill 271, number 2. Representative Harshman, please.
Mr. Speaker, that the next amendment, I'd move second reading amendment. Mr. Speaker, and I'm going to withdraw it here just briefly. And again, there is no delay on this. It happens in fiscal year 26. So that's going to be next school year is when this revenue reduction happens. So again, when you go home and meet with your school boards, 42 of our school districts, you will have cut enough funding to fund their school district. Just so you have the facts when you're there and so you can vote how that's going to get replaced. So I withdraw the amendment, Mr. Speaker, and encourage a no vote on the bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. The amendment has been withdrawn. Seeing no objection, so ordered. Members, having Bill 271 been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall the bill pass? Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Allemand, excused. Andrew? Angelos? Banks? Excused. Bear? Brady? Bratton? Brown, Gary? Brown, Landon? Byron? Campbell, Elisa? Campbell, Kevin? Chestick? Clouston? Connolly? Davis? Eklund? Erickson? Filer? Geringer? Guggenmoss? Haroldson? Harshman? Heiner? Heft? Jarvis? Johnson? Kelly? Knapp? Larson Lloyd? Larson JT? Lawley? Lean? Locke? Lucas? McCann? Nicholas? Ottman? Pendergraft? Posey? Provenza? Riggins, excused. Rodriguez Williams? Schmid? Sherwood? Singh? Smith? Storer? Strzok? Stivar? Tarver? Thayer? Washut? Wasserberger? Webb? Weber? Worf? Williams? Winter? Wiley? Yin? Mr. Speaker? Are there any changes? Are there any changes? Closing vote? Vote closed. 32 aye, 27 no, 3 excused.
House Bill 271, having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the House, House Bill 271 has passed the House. Next bill for our consideration will be House Bill 207.
Do you want one?
House Bill 270, sponsored by Representative Bear, Permanent Middle Trust Fund, Spending Policy, an act relating to public funds being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
We have an amendment, but we're still waiting on it to be delivered, so hang tough, ladies and gentlemen, and we will let them do their magic,
Would you like one?
and we will have it shortly to you.
I'll just give it to, oh, the one. Oh, no. It's on its way out.
Great opportunity to stand up and stretch your legs, ladies and gentlemen, if you so see fit. Thank you, Representative Davis, for being so enthusiastic. Representative Bear. Okay, who does the best jumping jacks? Representative Nicholas, there you go. Try to do that. Beat that one.
Oh, sure. Yeah, during third reading, it's hard to do anything extra.
Yeah, I knew you were so busy.
Yep.
I figured it might wait till lunch at this rate.
It might have to. Because I really haven't been able to review these either, so.
Okay.
So just hang on to that one, actually, Virginia.
All right.
And actually, I'm gonna leave this in there. I just need to. All right.
Depending on how long this amendment takes in the discussion on this amendment, we will be getting to committee the whole previous to our going to lunch, I trust. And so that's a first here for some time. Representative Provenza is going to do a short tutorial on how to be able to see the roll call vote as you go through on the live voting. So Representative Provenza, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Given that I've had some questions on this and we've got some folks at home that might be listening and want to know, and this is a new system, if you are wanting to access the live roll call, so as the chief clerk is taking the vote on a bill or on an amendment, the way to access that live screen is to go to wyoledge.gov, so our main website. On the bottom left under calendars, you'll go to legislative meetings. and you'll hit legislative meetings, and then it'll pop up the day for Monday, February 3rd. On that list, you'll see House floor session. So if you want to watch the House floor session, you go to details next to that. On the top of that page, so it'll say House Tuesday, February 4th, 2025. It'll show our second reading, our third reading, and our committee of the whole list. But on the top right of that, you'll see a link, just a little red text that says live roll call display and calendar. If you click on that, that is where you will be able to see the live votes as they show up on our chief clerk's screen. So if you have any other questions about accessing that, or you want me to go through that again with you privately, please let me know. But that is today's fun fact.
Thank you, Representative Provenza. Appreciate you doing that. Thankfully, we appreciate that. Representatives, we are now on third reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 270. Representative Harshman, please proceed.
Mr. Speaker, I'd move third reading amendment number 1 to 270. Ask for your favorable consideration, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for your positive action. Appreciate it. Members, this is really an important bill. And this amendment, if you can open it up, and Mr. Speaker, I'm going to divide the amendment. There's really two concepts to it. And so if you'd go to page 2 of your amendment, and Mr. Speaker, on the amendment, it would start on line 8 of the amendment, where it says page 2, line 1, and it would go down through line 20. That would be Division 2. So if you can just circle that or mark that on page 2 of the amendment, then the rest of the amendment, Mr. Speaker, is all Division 1. And really, Division 1 is about where this 0.5% cut comes from, and Division 2 is a proposed step down over 3 years on this.
Proceed. It is divisible.
Okay, Mr. Speaker,
Which division do you want first, sir?
Could I start with Division 2? Would that be
Division number 2, yes.
Okay,
please
thank you,
proceed.
Mr. Speaker, appreciate that. So members, on page 2 of the amendment, lines 8 through 20, and the amendment says page 2, line 1. It's all on page 2 of the bill. And really, this just does a 3-year step down to 4.5. We just passed a 2-year step down on the school side. This would just slow this down over 3 years. And folks, this bill is effective immediately, so it's going to affect fiscal year 26, which is what we are budgeting on right now. So this cut is going to happen right now. It's going to show up on your goldenrod when this bill passes the House. And how much money are we talking about? And remember, we currently have a 5% spending policy of the 5-year rolling average, which is in effect a 4.5% spending policy already. I think all of you are making that amount in your checking account right now with high interest rates. As I've mentioned, we've made over 14% last year, and I gave you handouts for the 10-year and 20-year. It's well above that, our current actual 4.5%. But we're talking, Mr. Speaker, $51 million. Where are you going to find the money? This goes in as a spend. It goes in on the budget as a revenue reduction. It's just like spending $51 million, because we already have this profiled on your goldenrod. Now you're going to reduce our revenue. So this is just like spending $50 million more bucks. Where are you going to get the money? The only cuts I've seen out of committee number 2 is about $106 million in cuts, and $100 million of it was out of energy projects, matching fund. Cut $6 million. That's a rounding error. So where are you going to find the money, committee number 2? So again, it comes in, and what'll happen is the law states it'll flow out of the LSRA, just so there's no pain to anybody. And then when we leave, the LSRA will be below $1 billion, first time in a decade. And then we're getting closer to that school guarantee, right? That school guarantee, then when we get to $500 million, that shuts off. So You can see the fiscal cliff that we're driving this bus on, and the bus is the state of Wyoming. And again, we have the most volatile revenue stream, us and the big state, the biggest state in the union. We have the most volatile revenue streams, and this is one of our most stable. And now we want to reduce it. And so again, Mr. Speaker, on division number 2, this would, instead of the chop happening in July of 50 million, it would start with about 15 million, 17 million this July. It'll still be in your goldenrod for this budget. And then when this appropriation committee comes back to craft, and our legislature crafts a 2-year budget for the 69th, the full effect will be in. So just trying to roll it out a little slower. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Bear, for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the bringer of the amendment, but I'll ask you to resist this amendment. Folks, we don't have a revenue problem, we have a spending problem. And I'll remind this body of our debate about the capital construction bill. The bringer of this amendment was all for spending several times what this particular bill addresses. Again, it was $28 million in the original.
Point of order,
and
Mr.
continuing-
Speaker.
Point
of order.
What is your point, Representative?
My point is, I don't think we're talking about my vote on another piece of legislation, Mr. Speaker. I think we're talking about this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Bear, please keep it to the amendment, not addressing people or their votes, please, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Appreciate that direction, and I will. Folks, we don't have a spending problem. I mean, we don't have a revenue problem. We have a spending problem, folks. Let's keep that in mind. We've done good work here. We'll continue doing good work here. I really have a lot of faith in this body that we are going to keep our spending under control, and we'll be able to withstand this $28 million per year.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Provenza, first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the last speaker who said we don't have a revenue problem, as of Friday, our total revenues that we've cut in the bills that we've brought so far in our past is $372,489,500. We're gonna have a revenue problem, a very serious revenue problem.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Larson Lloyd, for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I would agree that we have a spending problem, and part of that is we've taken the historic revenue designed for the operation of state government, and we're shifting it to backfill local and counties. That's impacting and causing us to now make adjustments here that are perhaps unwarranted. So I agree that our spending we do have a spending problem. We're getting things confused.
Thank you, Representative. Any other representatives for their first time? First time? Second time? Representative Bear, second time.
Appreciate the debate on and against the division and the amendment.
Any other members for their second time? Back to the bringer.
Thank you,
Representative
Mr.
Hirschman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I think the good chair of committee number 2 said it's 28 million a year. How many of you know how big a revenue reduction this is? It's the same as spending. It's going to affect our goldenrod. Revenue reductions or spending increases. It's not 28 million a year. It's over 50 million a year and growing. Okay, so just so that last bill passed by one vote, as you're sitting in your chair and you're going to affect the goldenrod with your vote on this bill in a minute, just like spending 51 million, it's going to put us underwater that much more. So, Mr. Speaker, if we're going to go underwater, I'd hopefully just like to go about chest high this year before we fully go underwater next year on this. So I'd encourage an aye vote on division number 2. Thank you.
Members, you are voting on third reading amendment number 2 to House Bill 270, Division 2. Bear in mind, members, this is on page 2, beginning at line 8, running through line 20. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed, no. The division has not been adopted. On to Division 1. Representative Harshman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so Division number 1, Mr. Chairman, I move Division number 1. So we're going to go down this road of reducing 50 million a year. So where should we take it from? And so currently, we have in actuality, a 4.5% spending policy. We've talked about that. It's because it's based on the 5-year rolling average. Now we're going to move to a 4.5 of the 5 years, so it's actually going to be a 4%, right? And we guarantee 3.75% of this with the reserve account. And I don't want to I'd love to have a big TV here and show you a prop, but I can't. And so what this would do is a couple things. It's going to guarantee then the full 4.5% out of the reserve account. So we can profile that on the Craig and on the goldenrod. So that'll help us on that piece. So it's going to help with that. And then where does this 0.5% of this 50 million a year and growing come from? Well, currently it's split between the LSRA and the SIPA. And I, in this amendment, propose to move that to the general fund. So the general fund piece of the spending policy would move from 2.5% to 2%. And the LSRA and the SIPA would both remain at 1.25. So that's what the amendment does, and I'd stand for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Any members for their first time? No members for their first, no, one member. Representative Bear.
On and opposed to this division as well.
Any other members for their first time? Representative Larson Lloyd, first time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hats off to the good bringer of this amendment. I really like that because one of the things that we've been really concerned about as we've talked about this reduction is both on the school side and on the general fund side, we're taking the biggest hit in the LSRA and the SIPA. So remember, 45% of that SIPA we move that to school major maintenance, this goes to the school foundation program. Then we backstop schools with the LSRA, and we backstop our general fund with the LSRA. Those were going to be taking a hit. What this amendment does is leaves them immune from this cut and has the general fund taken. So well done, and support the amendment.
Thank you, Representative. Any others for their first time? First time on the third reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 270, Division 1. Any other members? Seeing none, second time. No takers? Question being called. Members, you are being asked to vote on third reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 270, Division 1. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed, no. Chair is in doubt. Members, please stand. All those in favor, please stand, and when you stand, please stand still. All those opposed? You may sit. All those opposed, please stand. You may be seated. The amendment has not been adopted. The vote was 31 to 26. I believe that is it for the amendments for 270. Okay. House Bill 270, having been having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall this bill pass? Chief Clerk will now please call the roll.
Allemand, excused. Andrew. Angelos. Banks, excused. Bear. Brady. I'm sorry, repeat. Bratton. Brown, Gary. Brown, Landon. Byron. Campbell, Elisa. Campbell, Kevin. Chestick. Clouston. Connolly. Davis. Eklund. Erickson. Filer. Geringer. Guggenmoss. Haroldson. Harshman. Heiner. Heft. Jarvis. Johnson. Kelly. Knapp. Larson Lloyd. Larson JT. Lawley. Lean. Locke. Lucas. McCann. Nicholas. Ottman. Pendergraft. Posey. Provenza. Riggins, excused. Rodriguez Williams. Rodriguez Williams. Schmid. Sherwood. Singh. Smith. Storer. Strock. Stivar. Tarver. Thayer. Washut. Wasserberger. Webb. Weber. Worf. Williams. Winter. Wiley. Yin. Mr. Speaker, are there any changes? Are there any changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 33 aye, 26 no, 3 excused.
House Bill 270, having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members of the House elected to the House, House Bill 270 has passed the House. Okay, Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the House resolve itself into committee of the whole.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed, no. Motion has been adopted. Representative Strzok. Oh, no, it's Representative J.T. Larson. You don't look anything like Strzok. That's okay, all right.
Committee of the Whole, please come to order. Let's see. Getting my list up here. All right. First bill for our consideration is House Bill 282. The reading clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 282, sponsored by Representative Locke, property tax acquisition value, an act relating to ad valorem taxation. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 3 revenue, to whom is referred House Bill 282, property tax acquisition value, respect the report, same back to the House with the recommendation that do pass. Ayes, Representatives Brown, Lean, Locke, Lucas, Stivar, Worf. Noes, Representatives Campbell, Storer. Excused, Representative Riggins. Representative Locke, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Vice Chairman Stivar?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move when the committee of the whole rises to report
and do so with the recommendation that House Bill 282 do pass. Now I yield the floor to Chairman of Committee 3.
Representative Locke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for this opportunity to present the bill. And what I would like to do, before I kind of get into the bill too much, I'll hit just a couple of highlights on the bill. But basically what we're talking about here is property acquisition value, property tax acquisition value bill. We've talked a lot about property tax relief bills. We've had many of these bills. But I consider this more property tax reform more than anything. I'll just do a quick kind of summary of some of what's in the bill. But before I do that, I would like to move, let's see here, I would like to move right, Committee of the Whole Amendment Number 1 for House Bill 282. And what I wanted to do with this in some discussion, originally in the bill, we had placed some text at the end of the State Board of Equalization paragraphs on, and you'll see that on pages, 6, 7, 8, and 9. And we decided that, or I decided that we probably didn't need that additional text in those paragraphs. And so as all this amendment does is it removes that text. You'll see that. So it removes the text beginning on pages. It makes a minor change on page 2, line 2, removing that 3911 102.1C Romanettes 2 and 3. And then it really, that bulk of this amendment, what it does is it removes everything from page 6, line 9 through page 7, page 8, and then from lines 1 through 10 of line 9. So that's what's removed from this. So any discussion on that? We just felt like that was some additional stuff in the bill that was not necessary, and so this is just removing some of that text from the bill.
Any discussion on Committee of the Whole Amendment Number 1? Ready for the question?
Ready for question.
Question being called on Committee of the Whole Amendment Number 1. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Committee of the Whole Amendment Number 1 has been adopted. We're back on the bill.
All right. Thank you very much. So one other, I would like to go ahead and, well, let's see if,
Okay, there's a Committee of the Whole Amendment Number 2, and I think representatives on our way to the mic. So. Representative Lawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move Committee of the Whole Amendment Number 2 to House Bill 282. Ladies and gentlemen, one of the things this bill does is has two components to it. One is the acquisition value component, but the other one goes into the statute where we have the percentage of the valuation that we base the tax on. No matter what valuation approach we're using, that percentage there, which is currently at 9.5% of valuation. So one of my concerns is that this is too much change all at once, and two significant parts of the process. So this amendment basically takes out the proportion of the bill that lowers it down to 8.3% of the valuation and restores it back to the current 9.5% of the valuation. It appears very complicated, but it's mostly a conforming amendments that are being made. So with that, I stand for any questions on Committee of the Whole Amendment Number 2.
Any questions on Committee of the Whole Amendment Number 2? Representative Locke.
and I consider this a friendly amendment. I agree there's a lot going on with the dynamics and the costs, and I think this was a good amendment to get us back on track with the specifics of what the acquisition bill is doing. So I'm in favor of this amendment.
Representative Lee? No? Okay. Any further discussion? Question, ready for the question? Question being called on Committee of the Whole Amendment number 2. All those in favor, please say aye. Opposed, no. Committee of the Whole Amendment number 2 has been adopted. We're back on the bill. Representative Locke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'll go ahead and now proceed with the bill. So let me talk to the bill, give a quick summary to the bill. And going back, so I'm just able to strike a few things, make it a little bit easier. But in short, what this bill is doing this is going to apply to the new fourth category, the residential residential property category is what this does. What this bill also does in here, it does a rollback to the 2019 year. And I'll explain as I go through this. The next thing that you'll see in this bill, and these are some of the key components, the next thing you'll see in this bill is that after the rollback, then it starts applying an escalator each year. And the escalator will be either 2% or CPI, whichever is less. It'll start applying to that baseline year, and you'll see how that applies. And then ultimately, you'll see as I go through what I'll kind of refer to as the phases of this change, you'll see that ultimately we don't move to acquisition value until we get to 2026. And we do that in somewhat of a phased approach. So let me summarize it here, but then I'll get into the bill to show you where that happens. Kind of in phase one, what it does on the rollback, the approach is to go back to the 2019 base year. So if you bought your house before 2019 or on or before 2019, the rollback takes you back to the fair market value that your price was at in 2019. So some people would have liked this to roll back to the 40 years when they bought their house. The objective here was to find a decent baseline year and do a rollback to that year. Now, and so for anything on or before 2019, then of course there's going to be some interim years here. So between 2019, so 2020, 21 through 25, again, it takes if you bought your house in 2020 or you bought it in 2021, your baseline will go back to the year you bought the house at the fair market value of that base year. And in each of these cases, the next year starts the escalator on your house. So I tried to do this to make the simplest approach to rollback that I possibly could put in place to make implementation doable. And finally, phase 3 of this is right now in this bill in 2026, conceptually, that's the first year that the department and the assessors will start taking acquisition value as the value of your home. Okay, so I did the fair market value in these previous phases to try to simplify implementation as much as we possibly could. So that's kind of how the bill lays out. There's some other dynamics in this bill, fairly minor, on how transfers would occur. I tried to give some guidance that the department could use ultimately. But let me go through the bill now, and I'll summarize some of the key sections. So as you go through the bill, as I mentioned before, a lot of the language you're going to see in the first pages, a lot of this, several pieces of this got removed, but you'll see some conforming language, a few minor changes in here. There will be several places you'll see, like when you get to page 2, you'll see places except for as provided in section J. There is some procedures and processes in here to try to put some additional teeth into that process to make sure when properties sell, the statement of considerations are done properly and people are held accountable. We tried to put some teeth in there. That's why section J on page 3 was put in there. Once you'll start seeing some assertions in here. When you get to page 4, for example, fair market value for residential real property shall be determined by 39. So this is page 4, line 7. You'll start to see some places where in some of these statutes we have to basically point to where the changes are going to be. Fair market value for residential real property shall be determined as provided in Wyoming statute 3913-103B 15, and 18, and you'll see that's inserted there to give us some of the paragraphs that we're going to get to here shortly with some of the meat in there. The paragraph at the bottom of page 4, that's where the amendment before took that 8.3 to 9.5. So you probably saw that change. Moving forward, you'll see there's a bunch of the pages here in between. There will be several kind of conforming languages that you'll see similar to page 5, or other value as required by law. And you'll skip through 6, 7, 8, and 9 to kind of, as you get down toward the bottom of page 9. It talks a little bit there. There's some text inserted into 3911-109. There's just some text inserted in there where it talks about the rebuttal presumption in favor of evaluation asserted by the department shall not apply to the extent the rebuttal presumption conflicts with, and then it inserts the rebuttal presumption in 3913-103B 18A3, and you'll see that, and we're going to get to that. So a lot of these are just conforming language to make sure these statutes are pointing to the right place. So I'm going to move ahead because pretty much all of these ones you see in between in these pages are just conforming language to move us to the key component that is coming up on page, and I just got to flip through a few of these conforming, and we'll get down to, basically we'll get down to page, we'll get down to page 13, and this kind of is where the paragraph, some of these new paragraphs, or one of these new paragraphs starts to be added here on page 14, sorry. We're going to get down to the body of this document. So starting about midway, line 13 on page 14, this is the real body of the document. So again, this will summarize the phases. So sorry I took so long to get to the important stuff. But in short, the following shall apply to the valuation of residential real property as made subject to taxation in paragraphs 3C of this subsection. So here's where we begin. Beginning on January 1st, 2026, the fair market value of residential real property shall be determined as follows. Jumping down to the bottom, Roman numeral I there. For any residential real property that was last acquired on or before December 31st, 2019, the base year value for the residential property shall equal the fair market value of the property on January 1st, 2019. So here is where we're taking that year's fair market value to use as our baseline. Okay? We're using that as our baseline. Then you'll see for kind of this next phase of this for any residential real property that was last acquired on or after January 1st, 2020. Now you go into the 2020 through 2025 years. Again, this looks fairly complicated, looks like a big bill, but it's actually very simple, because in this case, what happens is between January 1st, 2020 and December 31st, 2025, basically, whenever you purchased your house, it just goes to the fair market value for that year as your baseline, okay? And then once you get down to Roman numeral 4, this is where, I'll read this just briefly, notwithstanding subdivision 3 of this paragraph, for any residential real property that was acquired on or after 2026, the fair market value of the property on January 1st of the year the property was acquired shall be used as the base year value for the property if, or basically fair market value will be used. Now, what this paragraph presents is some unique cases. In moving to making a change from the way the process is currently done, I found that there were two fairly unique cases, and so that's what's covered in this paragraph. If you, after January 26, if you do purchase a house, let's say it's a non-arm's length transaction, okay? So let's say this is a transaction where somebody in this room gives their house to somebody else in this room for $10. The concept is, how do we put a value to that, right? And one of the things that we came up with, one of these paragraphs describes that scenario. So that would be a scenario where you came in and say, wait a minute, I only paid $10 for my house. And that's paragraph 1 on page 16. And basically that paragraph says that, hey, if there's a preponderance of evidence that says it was not an arm's length transaction, was no true fair market. Because if you think about acquisition value is fair market value at time of purchase. That's where we're going with this bill. Okay? But this paragraph, what it does is say, if there's a preponderance of evidence that says, hey, it was not a fair market value transfer, and the transaction was, the party to the transaction were acting to undue influences, then, and not arm's length, then what this does is this gives an opportunity for the assessor to say, well, that wasn't a true transaction, and apply and calculate a fair market value as a more realistic value of that. The second condition is there are sales where a person just, it's a cash transaction, and the new buyer refuses to provide the data that is needed to be handed to the county clerks, and ultimately, you know, they hand them the statement of consideration with really no data. So there's no, you can see nothing about the actual purchase price, right? This bullet number 2 gives the case that says, hey, if the proper data is not provided to the clerk, then in that case, again, the county assessor has the opportunity to say, wait a minute, based on this, we're going to calculate a fair market value for this house. We're going to use this year's fair market value is how this works. So these were a couple of specific cases that were inserted in here. And then when you get going down to the bottom pages, so these were a couple of cases where fair market value continues to be used and calculated. And finally, when you get to the bottom of page 16, paragraph B, the base year value determined on the paragraph A of this paragraph shall be adjusted as follows. So here we're getting to the escalator, if you will. And this is where, if you look at Roman numeral I on page 17, this is where it is calculated at the lesser value of 2% or the consumer price index. So that kind of explains how the base year is adjusted. Okay? The base year value will be adjusted as necessary to account for increases in the value of the property caused. So Roman numeral 2, the base year shall be adjusted necessary to account for increases in value where property to the property caused by new construction of significant additions. So this paragraph, the goal with this paragraph, we've tried to put some guidelines in here on how significant construction will work. The objective here is not to make a change if you finish your basement. Goal is not to change your value based on finishing your basement. If you go and you add on to your house and you double the size of your house, you change the footprint, that's what's described here in this Roman numeral 2 paragraph, this change, okay? So that hopefully helps a little bit. We tried to handle the construction case. And then we describe, you'll see in paragraph, as you go through that paragraph, Roman numeral 2, it goes bottom of 17 and about 2/3 of the way through 18. That's all described on how they handle that construction. Let me see here as I move forward through the bill and hit a couple more of the real key issues. Some of the additional issues that will be important is I wanted to deal with some of the cases where property would be transferred. Okay, some transfer cases. So as you move through the bill, we get down to, and let me describe hit one kind of important point. You'll see on paragraph, or page 19, line 5D, paragraph D, Roman numeral I, acquisition value as used in this paragraph means the actual full amount paid or to be paid to acquire residential property. So what we're trying to do again is moving to acquisition value. Acquisition value is fair market value at time of purchase. And that's where we're trying to go with this bill. All right. And finally, a few kind of unique cases that we tried to address when you get to the bottom of page 19 is what we'll refer to as transfers and how those would be put in place. And the thought here is to give the department some guidance on how these unique cases would be handled. And so I'll go over those on page 20 fairly quickly, but in short, a transfer of property between a spouse or even their child. The approach here is that it's a transfer, so you're not seeing a separate acquisition. It's not a new acquisition value. You wouldn't sell it. It wouldn't have to be recalculated at fair market value. Okay, this would be your spouse. Let's say your spouse, you transferred it to your spouse in 5 years after you bought the property. So what would happen is the original baseline, the escalator would be applied to it each year, but the transfer to the house or to the spouse, what would happen is that escalator would just keep on going. It wouldn't change the base value of the house. So these transfer conditions that you see here is all they do is they simplify the base doesn't change, and but what happens is the escalator continues on exactly the same way it does. It was continuing on before. And we put a few cases in here. Transfer the property pursuant to a court order. We put in one here, property tax transfer. So let's say you put it in a trust, wouldn't have to be an adjustment to the fair market value. Property transfer to a corporation in your name, wouldn't have to be a change, there'd be no change. A donation of a property to a church or some tax exempt or a nonprofit organization. There wouldn't be an acquisition value. There wouldn't have to be a fair market value calculation. It would just continue on as it was taxed before. And this simplifies a number of different cases, and that was kind of the goal with that. So that it really summarizes almost the entire bill. And so I can just going back, the three different phases, we kind of went through the phases probably too many times, but 2019, you have that initial baseline. 2020 through 2025, we re-baseline all those houses that were purchased. And then starting in 2026, you buy a new house for $400,000. That statement of consideration, you go through a title company. That's what goes to the county clerks as part of the title. That's what goes in as your baseline. That's your house price. And then every year there's an escalator put in place. So that's roughly the entire bill and how it works. And then we had a few one-off cases I explained. Those might have gotten a little confusing. There are a couple of conditions where the county assessor may have to do a fair market value assessment because wasn't enough data on the purchase price. And we have conditions for that. So this covered a very broad range of one-off cases. Very simple implementation. Hopefully I didn't lose too many. I might not have explained it as well as I should, so please ask questions. But what it did is it made implementation about as simple as it could be made. It's data that already exists in our CAMA system to do the transition, to get us to an acquisition value moving forward. The big push on this, of course, is all of the things that everybody in this room had to hear at the doorstep, right? We all had to hear the same things, you know, why am I paying lights are on, nobody's home here, but you know, why am I paying taxes on unrealized capital gains? The big part of this bill is to start getting us into a baseline. Now, one could argue, hey, there's still a 2% escalator in there. Could you argue that you're still continuing to pay some on unrealized capital gains? That's absolutely true, you could. But, you know, here we are paying taxes on unrealized capital gains. Let's say 5 people come into your neighborhood and buy houses for $200,000 more than every other house in your neighborhood and above what people are asking for it. Now, all of a sudden, next year, you're paying that price. This avoids that kind of conflict, is what we're trying to do here. So ultimately, we're trying to make acquisition value. Basically, that's fair market value, or that's acquisition value is fair market value at time of purchase. So that's what the attempt with this bill is to do, and to move us forward on that. So I stand for questions.
Representative Ian.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. So members, this is an idea that has come before this body many, many times. And so to give a little history, 2023, we had House Bill 100. It was brought by a member who is in the gallery, a former member that's in the gallery right now. He brought a bill that ended up being a study to determine what are the requirements that we would need to put in place if we wanted to transition to an acquisition value system for our property taxes. That study came out. It's in your emails. I sent it to your emails. For the members of the public, you can just search Wyoming Acquisition Value Study. I'm sure it'll pop up. So if you open that PDF, you go to page 21 of the PDF, page 15 in the bottom footer, and it's section 3.2. So it's how do we implement a property tax system based on acquisition value? The first step, which is on the bottom of this page, the first step is to change the Wyoming Constitution. So there are 3 sections of the Wyoming Constitution that impede us creating an acquisition value system. And all 3 of these are about making sure that, that we value things equally. So Article 15, Section 1, Article 15, Sections 9 and 10, Article 15, Section 11. So this bill would violate, if we pass this bill, it would violate all 3 of those. And if it were to go to court, so let's say I'm a new property buyer, I'm going to be paying higher taxes than someone that's been in there and is being valued at 2019 prices, I would go to court and I would bring this study and I would say, look, they even issued a study, the third party said it's unconstitutional, you should override this bill. So members, I don't want us to just put in something that we promised our voters that is wholly unconstitutional and is just going to get overturned. Know that this is unconstitutional. Know that we funded a study saying it's unconstitutional. The study's actually really good. I recommend everyone to go through it. And with that, I would urge you to vote no on the bill.
Representative Washit.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So there are some features of this bill that I really like. When I've met with my constituents, their ability to comprehend how the assessor comes to a dollar figure for the value of their property befuddles them. They don't understand. They say, there's no way I could get that kind of price from this property. People don't understand the process, therefore they suspect that there's some type of mischief going on every time their property taxes are assessed at a higher value. So I like the fact that we get away from some of that. I also like the clawback as a option and an alternative to a percentage rollback. Because the percentage rollback, as we heard from some of the representatives in the room, impacts some of these counties differently than it impacts other counties. And so when we do a percentage rollback, folks end up getting the short end. So the clawback, I think, helps fix that. So a couple of questions. The impact on our assessors. It seems to me that when we go to an acquisition value, the assessors will need fewer employees. Is that your conclusion as well? And my next question deals with the inflation, where you say 2% or CPI, whichever is less. So doesn't that leave us in a position where we have runaway inflation for any period of time, that the counties will continually be, or not just the counties, but everyone who benefits from residential property tax will continuously be underfunded as that period of inflation goes on? So just those are my questions.
Representative Eklund.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So what I turned to immediately was the fiscal note and the effect that it had on the counties, and kind of building on what the last speaker said. We got $260 million of reduced tax to the county in the first tax year, which I think would be every year subsequent after that too. But is there any plan to soften this blow to the counties, or any backfill that's suggested in the bill?
Representative Locke, I'm going to let you address some of those questions, and then we'll go to Representative Larson Lloyd. Okay. Representative Lloyd Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, would you mind, before I ask these questions, if I took a brief privilege of the floor?
Go ahead.
So, folks, as we're into property tax and valuation, putting your mind at ease, up in the North Gallery, I have some visitors with me today. I have two grandsons, Theodore and Frederick. Stand up there, boys. Look at these guys. Look at these guys. And furthermore, and their little brother, Parley, whose number, is he 20 or 21? 20, is he 20 or 21, Beck? He's 21, he's number 21. And their parents, my son Zach and his wonderful wife Alyssa, who are just down visiting, so thank you. Yes, that cute girl with him's my wife.
Theodore and Frederick, welcome to the House. You have an awesome grandpa.
So, Mr. Chairman, I kind of the question that I've got to the bringer of the bill that I hope you'll bear in mind in this is you formulated this draft, and we've gone back to the good presenter that talked about the study that was made, and we've heard the concerns from the assessors and the Department of Revenue. I'm trying to connect the dots to see how this bill takes into account the concerns that this just doesn't fit. And if you go to that study and look at it, one of the first things that it says is that a property tax that's based on acquisition value does not result in uniform and equal treatment of property taxpayers. I thought that was one of the intent. And then they talk about, as you talk about getting the disclosure of sales being an important factor, and I agree with that. But they note in the study that that's probably the biggest challenge. In fact, they said in their effort, they were provided 20,584 sales across the state, and only 68 of those were deemed a valid sale document. And so it appears to me that we're really opening the door for unprecedented conflict for our poor assessor's office when they come, as you said, if I understood, if this acquisition doesn't look appropriate, then they just say, no, that doesn't look right. Well, that's going to go over warm and fuzzy, and people are going to get anxious and unhappy, and all manner of emotion is going to fly that now our state assessors are going to have to respond to, whereas under our current system, they can base it on a model that can justify where it's at. And so with that lack of support and the conflict that I see that it has with the study that was intended to help us determine if this was a valid approach, can you help me understand your approach to, or could you at least share with me what data you have to support your arguments that what they're providing is wrong.
Representative Bear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, want to say my appreciation to the bringer of the bill. Many of my constituents have stated that they are ready for change, and this is reform. This is real change. This is reform, not just relief, and we've been doing a lot of different temporary relief measures over the last 2 years, or at least attempting. This is real reform, and I really applaud the bringer for bringing a new idea. It's one that was mentioned by the previous speaker from the center of the state when he said that his constituents were confused. Mine are too. This is an effort to eliminate that confusion. This is something that everyone can wrap their mind around. And the good speaker from the northwest part of the state said that, there's a study out there that says this is unconstitutional. Let me address that for a moment. First of all, I don't believe this is a good study. Oftentimes, when we fund studies in this body, there are certain inputs that are made as assumptions when the study started, and I don't think this one was not brought, I don't believe it was brought with the intent of really figuring out a way we can do this. And I'm looking for a can-do attitude, not just from this body, but from the department as well, and from those people out there in our counties that perform these assessments. So a can-do attitude is where we start with. And one of the things that's a part of the can-do, and we've had this discussion in this body in the 67th many times, and that is, what can this body do as far as determining what is constitutional and not constitutional? And those discussions in the 67th were very clear that this body determines what is constitutional until that other branch decides that it is not. And so with that, I want to bring your attention to the Constitution. In this section, Article 15, Section 11, it says this: all property except as in this Constitution otherwise provided shall be uniformly valued at its full value as defined by the legislature in three classes as follows. Guess what we've never done as a body, folks? You will not find in statute anywhere where this body defined full value. Could full value be acquisition value plus inflation? It sure as heck could. There's all of those constitutional arguments that are being brought right now and in the future are not going to work when this body can define what full value is. And that's what this bill does. It defines full value as the value you purchased your property for, and then over time plus inflation, or 2%, whichever is less. And I want to address the question that was brought again by that gentleman from the center of the state that said, well, aren't we going to lose ground if we do 2%? I'll remind the body that inflation, as addressed in CPI, that basket of goods that creates the consumer price index does not include housing. And inflation is a lot less effective on housing. That's why many people invest in property, because it's almost inflation proof. It does grow in value, and therefore the 2% is in there, but it doesn't grow like your groceries, your gasoline, those types of things. So I think it's a very good argument for it being the lower of those two, CPI or 2%, whichever is lower. So having said that, I also appreciate the bringer of the bill talking about the clawback. That is a bit of reform that really addresses that big change that we saw over the last couple of years. And we have in our previous exercises to put a cap on inflation, or a cap on the assessments, we have not addressed what happened in those years. We've addressed it going forward, but we never went back and fixed those. I think some of the relief efforts could do that, but none of those relief efforts have passed to this point. We have not provided that relief to our constituents that are taxpayers. And here's an opportunity in this one bill to address that, while at the same time creating reform and making it simple so everybody can figure it out. And I think that would really help those people in our counties who do these assessments, because sometimes people show up in their offices not exactly pleased when they disagree with them. This would make it easier for them to explain, easier for their taxpayers to understand exactly what's going on. And with that, I am on and for the bill.
Representative Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is an interesting concept, and is it a blueprint off of something else? Has this been tried before? And if so, where and what type of success has this tax policy brought forth?
Representative Rodriguez Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To the sponsor of the bill, thank you. This is probably one of the most important bills to me and my constituents that we're dealing with this session. There was a couple of questions that were brought up by the good representative that lives in the area where the river's named after the wind, in reference to a study that was recently emailed out. And I'll push back a little bit against that so-called study, because one of the things that I noticed, and I remember very clearly about it, is that it omitted the people. It omitted the people of Wyoming. It looked after big government. And I can tell you, I kind of conducted my own study. It was going door to door, making phone calls and talking to my constituents. And being taxed out of their homes was one of the most important things to them. I appreciate this bill. Right now, I watched not too long ago the committee meet and debate on this bill, and I appreciated one of the things that was brought up by the good vice chairman of the committee that took on this bill when he challenged the department that oversees equalization in our state. Because right now, Wyoming homeowners are paying taxes on paper profits, what's also known as unrealized capital gains. And they denied that. And that's frustrating to me. This bill restores fairness by ensuring that property taxes are based on stable and predictable systems, not market volatility. And again, thank you to the sponsor of the bill. On and for.
Okay, Representative Locke, I'm going to let you address some of the questions.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The question list was getting a little bit deep. To hit the unconstitutional issue right up front, it was mentioned that it's unconstitutional in Article 15, Sections 9, 10, and 11. Hitting those real quickly. The legislature shall provide by law for the State Board of Equalization is the first one. Okay, there. Duties of the State Board of Equalization. The duties of the State Board of Equalization shall be to equalize the valuation of all properties, several counties, and such other duties as may be prescribed by law, by what this body does. But getting back to the other constitutional issue that's in here, it says, and this was mentioned by a previous speaker, thank you so much for bringing that up, all property accepted as constitutionally otherwise provided shall be uniform valued at a full value, as was mentioned, as defined by the legislature in 4 class categories. And then when you go down to paragraph B, the legislature shall prescribe percentages of value, which shall be assessed. So there you go. That's what we're supposed to prescribe. We are applying a consistent percentage across all residential properties. That's what we're doing at that 9.5. That's what the 9.5 is capturing there. In my opinion, the other part of this, that's what the legislature is supposed to do, is prescribe a method that is consistent. People would say, oh, this is not uniform, this is not consistent. I'm sorry, but it is uniform. It is uniform. We're going to take your acquisition value, we're going to put an escalator on there to make sure you're not constantly paying for what everybody else paid for their house, and you're going to, that's going to be applied. So I believe that is a consistent process that's being applied to everybody. So that's at least the constitutional discussion. There was a couple of other items mentioned. Impact basically on CPI. That's exactly right. CPI could be higher. Now, CPI over the last many years has been fairly low in that 1 and change, 2 and change range. It could be higher, but yes, this would cap it at 2%. So that would be something we would have to manage for. First, there's no question about that. The second thing is, how does this impact assessors? Theoretically, over time, I would think this should be, once applied, I'm sure right at first, there's going to be some changes, going to be some complexities, but over time, once acquisition value gets put in place and is the baseline, it will probably reduce the workload on the assessors, because there's a much smaller range of properties where fair market value has to be considered there, where a calculation via CAMA, via some other mechanism, has to be considered. That captures that one. The study that came up, one of the items that was brought up was, the study, I believe, said that we had to go to, we're currently not a full disclosure state. I didn't explain this to everybody. There's some language in the bill that talks about this. And this was a long discussion that I've had with a lot of folks on, the study said, got to become a full disclosure state. Well, not really. We don't have to become a full disclosure state. What we're doing, and there's some language in the bill that enhances the disclosure to the key parties that already get this disclosure. The county clerks, the county assessors, the boards, the county and state boards of equalization, and the department. Okay, so what we didn't want to do is say, we need to become a full disclosure state. That was not the goal of this bill. But what we did have to do is enhance our disclosure, make sure that the process for the data that was provided to those entities was enhanced, and then make sure that that disclosure was clear, enhanced, and protected. So we did not make that change to full disclosure. We do not believe we needed to make this bill happen. So that was one of the issues. Valid sales came up. That was one of the issues that we attempted to put in here, is some enhancements. The Department of Revenue has to enhance that statement of consideration process. You'll hear a range of inputs on this. Some people will say there's not enough data. If you talk, now you think about it, what percentage of our sales go through a title company? A huge percent of our sales go through title companies. So if you talk to a title company, what will they tell you about acquisition value? They say, all of that data is already in there. We have to submit all of that detail to the county clerks. And I mention that because it goes to the county clerks for the title change, and then the data goes, of course, to our county assessor. So I'm inserting the clerks in there only because they're in that process. But my point is, these title, they go in there. And so there was this conversation on, well, we don't have enough data for these sales, these bad sales. Well, the problem is that process has to be robustly implemented and then consistently followed by everybody along the way. There's no question about that for this to work. Okay, and that's part of the process of making sure the department rolls out the right guidelines to do that. And if you talk to a title company and they say, well, can you tell how much of it was sale of the house? And let's say there was a car traded. Somebody gave me a car for $20,000 as part of that sale. The title company will say, absolutely, that's in there. Or if I bought the house for X amount and you left me an amazing television and an awesome washer and dryer and it was part of the personal property, that data's in there. So yes, the process has to be robust to support this, but at the end of the day, that's the process they're following now. And there are probably some enhancing steps that would have to be put in there to make sure that disclosure is robust. Excuse me, it was asked if it had been done before. And the answer is, this is similar, not exactly the same, but similar to Prop 13 in terms of what they did in California. When they implemented it in California. Now you're gonna hear Prop 13 is hated. And you know what? It's true. The state, local governments absolutely hate it because they can't go in and charge those people. You know, the guy who bought his house 30 years ago, they can't charge him for what the millionaire who just bought the little tiny house next to him for 20 million for. But do the people hate it? The only reason it's there because these people have been fighting back the government from taking more of their money for however long that's been in place, 40-some years now. Okay, so yeah, the governments hate it because they want to take more money. The people love it because it protects them from those escalations that everybody in your district has experienced. Okay, and that's where I'm going with this bill. That's why I brought it, and that's why it's so important an issue to me.
Representative Lean.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For the bringer of the bill, I just want to know why a 2% escalator and not a 5% escalator. But then I also want to say thank you for bringing this because it's been many doorstep conversations within my district. And I as well have individuals that have moved from that great state that you mentioned and to my district. And they asked if there was a possibility that we could get this put into place. Acquisition value is highly in favor for them. They sold their house after 38 years. They knew what the tax bill was going to be. When they moved to Wyoming 7 years ago, their tax bill has gone up 100%. They weren't prepared for that. And now we're looking at being able to tax them out of their home if these prices continue. I would love to go back and be able to say, we gave it a fair shot. We got acquisition value through the House and we sent it to the Senate and we had some great conversations. We need to be able to make this work for the people.
Representative, we don't refer to the other body on the other side.
Excuse me, on the other half of the house, on the other half of the building. As an interim topic, there was much debate about this, and there was also someone that came forward that had a can-do attitude that is now retired, who did spend a fair amount of time in the assessor office of one of our great counties. And so I want you to know that there are individuals out there that will tell you that this can be done. Is it going to be a heavy lift at first? Yes, but it has to be for true reform for the people of Wyoming, on and for the bill.
Representative Yin.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And members, I get it. You heard from your constituents. They want this. You also took an oath to the Constitution, both of the United States and the Constitution of Wyoming. If we do this as a bill, we do it out of order. So you heard from the good chairman of committee number 2. He pointed you to parts of the sentence. I want to say that's not the relevant part. The relevant part in both section 10 and section 11, so section 10, it shall be to equalize the valuation. So we prescribe the valuation, got it. But the Board of Equalization's job is to make sure that it's equal valuation among properties. And then in uniformity of assessment, it's that it shall be uniformly valued at its full value. So we can define how the value is. That's okay. What the issue is, if you can't uniformly value, you're saying two different houses that are the exact same houses. So I'm building a subdivision. I have two houses. They're exactly the same floor plan, exactly the same square footage. One person buys it in 2018. One person buys it from someone else in 2028. They're not being uniformly valued because the bill makes it so the 2018 house is valued at less than the 2028 house. And that's where we get the unconstitutionality. If we cannot uniformly value them the same, we are violating the Constitution. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Storer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To that point as well, Proposition 13 was a constitutional amendment that was put on the ballot in the 1970s in California and passed. And if this is what we want to do, that is the process for us to follow similarly. The authors of our Constitution, once again, they didn't care what the amount was, but they wanted it to be fair. They wanted taxation to be fair and equal. And what this does is throw that idea, that concept completely out the window. We will have tax based on who you are, whether you've had your home for 20 years or just tried to purchase it 6 months ago. This bill has a lot of unintended consequences. It's going to hurt young families trying to get into a home, while those of us in our elderly years will be able to get a tax break young families, it will be more expensive for them to live here. I would argue that we're making it very difficult for young families to live in Wyoming for all sorts of reasons. We don't really want to give them one of those. I can say that this bill will, it will bring a lot of people together, to sue the state. We have not provided any methodology to make up for the loss of resources that this bill will result in. And much of that will once again be coming from the northwest part of the state where people's property taxes have gone up the most and where they're the highest, and which result in an extraordinary windfall of residential taxes coming back to the state and paying for schools in your communities. That's really what this bill will do. It's going to hurt schools in your communities more than it will the constituents in my community. And in fact, it essentially will give the biggest tax breaks to second homeowners who aren't even residents of this state, who own $10 million homes or more. And, you know, we passed Amendment A. We have a process where we can differentiate between second homeowners and primary owner-occupied residences. These are the people we really should be thinking of. These are the folks that are asking us for support. This is why they passed Amendment A. And this bill doesn't even address, it just does it across the board. So again, it's unconstitutional. It helps the wrong people. It provides unintended consequences. And at the end of the day, it just gives rich people a hell of a tax break. Thank you.
Representative Clouston.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the bringer for this bill. I know this was a ton of work. I guess my question really comes into, last year we passed 4 tax bills. This year we passed House Bill 169, which was $225 million. This bill, it looks like, based on the report, will be another $170 million in breaks. What has been the discussion in the Revenue Committee on figuring out which one do we need, which ones do we get rid of? What is the process of clearing this up, not just for this body, but for the whole state that's wondering, we're passing all these tax bills. What is the effect on the state and how will we resolve that? Thank you.
Representative Locke, I'm going to let you address some questions.
Thank you. I'll go ahead and answer a few of those. So there was a question that was brought up. It was why 2% and not 5%? I'll give you guys a real quick view of that. Okay, let's just talk about 5%. You increase your property taxes every 5%. That means every 14.4 years, your property tax doubles. So by the time you get to that 29 and change year, you're talking about quadrupling your property taxes. You think you paid off your house, you think you own it? No, you don't. You just replaced everything you had in a mortgage with property tax. Now, does that sound like you own your property, right? That's why I went with a lower percentage. Some could argue no percentage is better. That being said, I understand the schools issues that were brought up, the other things, the other fact, counties and locals, and the fact that this fuels those machines. Absolutely, I get it. That's why I tried to come up with a number that's saying, hey, the problem is, you know, it's like, it's a little bit like not taking care of the people who are feeding the machine, okay, which is what they're doing. So this was an attempt to find some common ground. I realize there's this concept, well, oh man, this first clawback is painful. I agree that there's a step to get us back over the bubble that we just crossed. There's a step to do that to get us on a level playing field. But the goal is not to cut the legs out. But I want to talk about the rollback because it's kind of important. And somebody caught on to this. The real key part of the rollback, and this is the best part, and this is why it's better than many of the other property tax bills. You go out and you take 25% off. Think about how it affects some of the counties. 25% hit against some of the counties in hardship counties. I better use the right word, rather. I almost said poor county. Sorry about that. But the hardship counties is a perfect example. Well, let's take one of those hardship counties that only went up 10%. What does the rollback do to them? Well, interestingly enough, everybody says, oh, it takes away their 10%. No, it doesn't. Because what happened? The properties that were bought that went back to the 2019 baseline, what happened to every one of those? They got hit by the escalator. If the escalator was up to that 2%, let's use the 2% cap as a max. Let's say it hit that. Guess what? Those properties have re-escalated back up almost to get back to that 10%, above that 10% in the 5 years by the time this gets implemented. Okay, so that county wasn't hurt by an extra 15% below what was happening. Those hardship counties were only affected by what they went up. That's exactly how it ends up affecting every county. Now, you can sit here all day and say, is 2019 the right year or the wrong year? Well, let me explain the rollback. And somebody brought up the issue of the 260 million. One of the representatives brought that up. That was a great point. So everybody wants to know where did that 260 million come from? And by the way, that's why I was grateful for the amendment from the attorney, from the representative who brought it to change the 8.3 back to 9.5. And here's why. That created a whole different dynamic. With that out, let me explain the 260 million. In 2019, the property taxes collected were 380, I'm going to be off a million or two, but all property taxes collected across the state were roughly about $387 million. Okay? And that's just residential property. Sorry, let me be clear. That's just residential property. You're right. And which is the group we're targeting. So sorry, I should be very clear and specific on that. Now, if you look what has happened to that has stepped up over the last, whatever that is, 4 or 5 years. The 2024 number for that is 652 million. There's your 260 million that are in your fiscal note. Okay? So that's what's happening here. So everybody says, well, we're going back to that 260 million. We're actually not going back to that 260 million because we're going back and resetting the baseline, but what's happened to every one of those properties that was purchased? We're putting a lower escalator, so we're not going up as high, but we are continuing to escalate to support that. So I felt like this was as healthy and even distribution as possible. But now I want to merge this with the other property tax bills. Okay? We've done all these property tax bills. That is a great point. Every one of these has been short-term relief at best, and many of us would argue it's been a bit messy. But we've all been trying to get relief here and relief there, and we've been picking winners and losers, and we've all been doing it, you know. Me the worst of all, okay? The goal with this is to get some true reform in place. Because ultimately, those exemptions, here's the problem. Everybody says, fair market value is working great. Yeah, why are we going for exemptions to try to save our people's houses? That's going to be the argument. They say, the current process works fantastic. Yeah, it works real fantastic. That's why you're all getting phone calls from people on fixed income who are afraid they're about ready to lose their house. Okay, this is an attempt for some true reform. Those are short-term relief. So you ask what happens? Are these exemptions needed if we put some reform in? I would argue no. In fact, I would argue, let's just say we put in a short-term one, and let's say that it would still be in place when we decided to implement this. I would say a short-term exemption that was in place. Let's just take House Bill 169. If it was still in place in 2 years or whatever we decided was the right year to implement this, if it was still in place, I'd say that it needs to be repealed. Because once we get reform in place, those exemptions are not what we should be shooting for. It's not the right way to do this. Want to talk about inconsistent, us picking winners and losers, us trying to figure out, well, how do we keep the rich guy from making more? This is an attempt to go to a uniform approach to what people are paying so people can predict it for their life. The other issue that came up hurts young people's ability to enter the market. I'm sorry, but if a young person getting ready to buy a house and he's watching his friends and neighbors and they just got hit by a 70% and then another and 20% the year before that, and one of the representatives said 100% one of the houses went up. That new person going into the market, they're sure not wanting to go into that market because they might pay for it this year, but they're afraid for next. In this case, their property tax is predictable. If anything, it makes it easier for those young people to buy a house because they kind of know what's going to happen next year and the next year and the next year. We want to create a plan that leaves a little food on the kitchen table, right? Something like this is a good way to go, in my opinion. So,
Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate all the high-level conversation we've heard in recent history. But a little closer to home, speaking for House District 2, this legislation will result in a lack of uniformity in property values on the eastern side of the state. Two similar houses, side by side, will have much different values if one sells and one doesn't. And like we've just been hearing a little bit about, I believe this tax policy will hurt new homeowners who in my district are oftentimes young families with lower incomes. And this legislation will require my young families to pay a higher tax bill. In addition, over 50% of the assessed value in my counties are classified as residential. And therefore, acquisition value would adversely impact my rural counties more than counties who depend less on residential property taxes for county revenues. So when I think about my young families and my rural counties and my small towns, I don't believe I can support this legislation.
Representative Chestik.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Some of what I came up here to say has already been said, but I'll try and be brief. I do appreciate the good chairman of committee number 2 who wants to have a can-do attitude and get things done. I appreciate that. But a can-do attitude does not trump what you can't do. There are things you can't do. We can't wish away the Constitution. The Constitution is there, we're bound by it, and if it says you can't do it, wanting to have a can-do attitude does not mean we can ignore the Constitution. And going to Article 15, Section 11A, which the good chairman quoted, doesn't mean that the legislature can do the job of the court. The legislature does not have the power to interpret the words of the Constitution. That is not our job. That is the job of the highest court of the state. What we're arguing here about is the last, the middle of the sentence, shall be all property shall be uniformly valued at its full value. The argument here is that the legislature can define what full value is. Can we define full value to be non-uniform? It says it must be uniformly valued at full value, and if we come up with a scheme that is non-uniform, that violates the language of the Constitution. And that is the job of our highest court, to determine whether we're violating the actual words of the statute of the Constitution, uniformly valued. This bill does not create uniform values. It creates differential values depending on how long you've owned the property. Those who have owned it for a long time are advantaged over those who have purchased it recently. And for that reason, I am quite certain that this bill does violate the Wyoming Constitution, and I will not vote for an unconstitutional bill.
Representative Connolly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to go back to the question about, we have an initiative, a petition out there that people worked really hard to sign. get their names on the petition so that they could be on the ballot in 2026 to reduce property taxes by 50%. And this, it sounds like, would go into effect in 2026. How would the ballot initiative then affect this? And the other question I have is, well, years ago, I always thought this acquisition thing just made sense to me, and I'm here with an open mind, but I'm hearing both sides of this issue, and I'm looking at, wow, where are we if we go ahead and pass this acquisition bill? And the first thing that happens is the State Board of Equalization, if I can say that. Can't, sorry. I didn't say it. You guys just pretend that was not said, okay? If a certain entity turns right around and sues the legislature, or however that might work, because they are saying that this is unconstitutional. It seems to me like this thing's probably going to end up in court, where the courts will decide, because I don't know. I've heard both sides. No, it's not a constitutional thing. Yes, it is. I don't know. I think the courts will probably decide that. So where does that leave us? And I'll tell you, some of the people that I've talked to in my district, they're really getting interested in a sales tax, to be able to use a sales tax to fund property tax. So I think there's some other ways out there just in case. But anyway, thank you.
Representative Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, on against this Hotel California tax, it just so happens that I had a tragedy in my family, and I moved to California back in about 2002, and I bought a home there, and that's when I learned about Prop 13, and it was fascinating. But what I can tell you is, in fact, I just got online and was looking up. There's numerous research papers about it. What it really did in the long run was raise the property taxes more than they would ever have raised normally. It widened the gap between the poor and the rich. It caused a severe housing shortage because no one was building and because the cost of construction went up. And it dramatically impacted the funding of education. In fact, they went from the 5th highest funded program in the United States down to the 47th in a matter of 15 years, just like that, boom, 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 which forced them to bring back Prop 98, which then was a guarantee to fund more money for education just to catch up. And frankly, that California has not caught up, and a significant number of their schools are now private, are different, all kinds of different programs, but it's just a whole new world down there. It's a different rodeo when you go to schools in California. Thank goodness, after I've been there a few years, I moved back to Wyoming as fast as I could. But those are the realities of it. If you get online, I mean, it's just clear as a bell. Let's talk about what this really does, because this shifts the burden to the new wealthy home buyers over time. And if you see whatever number you put on it, you got the $260 million that talks about the impact from House Bill 127 from a few years ago. And I've heard 170 bounced around 1 year on this. But because of the nature of this, because for all those people that don't sell their houses, they hold their value. And by the way, California has a 2% increase on it, just like this one does, that they can put on annually. But what it does is it takes that 170 million, and over time, it goes nowhere but up, because the people that hold their houses, kind of like our 25-year tax cut program that we just put into effect last year, it starts stacking. And the people that hold their houses pay less and less and less. And so every new one that comes online has to pay more, because that acquisition power, because it raises the cost of buying a home. It just does. I mean, the facts are the facts. And so what we are really doing is protecting the current homeowners to keep our taxes low, so someone else in the future has to come in and pay our obligations. That's what this program does. And so, one more question, two questions. Number one, I'd like to know what the testimony from the Board of Equalization was during the committee, because my understanding is they said it was clearly unconstitutional. And if that's the case, I'd like to know and what their rationale was. Then I also have a question on how you would increase valuations based upon new construction or modification of your current home. I've done a few remodels in my house, and the ones I've done them both by myself, and I don't think I improved the value. I probably worsened the value because of my construction skills. But if you take if you hire someone to come in and do it, then essentially you take, the way I read this, you take the cost of construction, you bring that, and that then increases the value that much. But my experience is when you put an extra bedroom or another bathroom or you remodel your kitchen, overall, you really don't increase the value of your home. And so it's almost an artificial increase if you take your actual cost of construction to raise up the value of the home. And that just doesn't make sense to me, because otherwise my home would be worth a lot more now than what it really is on the market if I had actual costs of those construction. So thank you.
Representative Locke, I'm going to let you address some questions, and then we'll move to the next speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you for that last question, because I want to kind of back into them, because that was a really good point. The intention of that new construction, I'll be honest with you, that's one of those areas where it could be argued that till you sell your house, nothing should change. That could go away. What we attempted to put in there, though, in the case where not where you finished a bathroom or, built a new bedroom within the existing house or even finished your basement. That was not what the objective was. That's why we attempted to make it a little bit more clearly what significant improvement was. So it had to be, for lack of a better term, I added on a big chunk. I significantly changed the footprint of my house. That was the objective of that, is to give some mechanism for a more extreme change to a house. So I at least wanted to address that one. The other thing I wanted to, it drastically separated rich and poor. Well, one might say that's true, but I would say this, I certainly would gladly keep those people who have been, they retired 10 years ago and thought they were going to, be done 10 years later, and they still got plenty of life left in them, and now all of a sudden, based on their fixed income, they can't stay in their house. Hey, if we do something that makes that happen, good for us. We did the right thing there, I will tell you that for sure. How is this impacted by the ballot initiative? The ballot initiative is a wild card. At the end of the day, even the ballot initiative could be arguably some kind of short-term relief, because take a ballot initiative, give everybody a 50% discount. Okay? It's a short-term fix, I don't care what you say. If you'd have given everybody a 50% discount 5 years ago, everybody would have paid at least 50%, well, not everybody, but a large percentage of the people they would have already absorbed that 50%, and they'd be on their way to the next. Many of you in many of your counties. So those are short-term fixes no matter how you look at it. Now, what happens with the ballot initiative, I can tell you this. Give the people nothing for support. Ballot initiative, there will be more hunger for it in 2 years when it's time to vote on that. I do believe that with all my heart. One of the things about lax uniformity, I think it's pretty uniform, right? Very simple process. My acquisition value, controlled escalator. When the house sells, it sells for what it sells for. People talk about hurts new homeowners. Guess what? Those homeowners are paying that price anyway. But what's happening to them more than anything? Guess what? What happens to them when if their house went up 2% and it was predictable? Great. What happens if they bought it and the next year it was a 25% increase or a 30% increase? You think that new homeowner, that young person isn't hurting? That young person's hurting, and that's what the current system allows. Okay? 10 rich guys walk into your neighborhood, nothing against rich people. God bless them, right? 10 people with a lot more money than you walk into your neighborhood, buy the houses around you. Guess what? Next thing you know, 2 years from now, 5 years from now, you can't afford your home. That's what going with a more, an approach like this, that yes, it is a uniform approach for everyone. That's the value this gives.
Representative Storr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a few more thoughts to wrap this up this morning. We did hear from the agency that equalizes taxes, and they did tell us that they would be forced to sue the state should this bill pass. We also heard from our friends in the oil and gas industry who also said this was just a bridge too far for them to feel like they were being taxed. This was a shift of the tax burden away from the public and to that industry. Who among us can actually tell us the impact of the bills we've already passed this session on what the impacts related to property tax for our counties and our schools? I don't know. I just know that about 40 years ago, the people of Wyoming voted, and they voted to say that property tax is how we were going to pay for our schools and how we were going to pay for our local services at the county and city level. And that makes a lot of sense because as those populations grow, the need for services grows. And so the tax base grows along with it. It made a lot of sense then, and I think it still does today. The bringer of the bill is correct that overall property taxes for residences have increased significantly in the last 5 years. But it's also worth noting that 35% of that valuation came from Teton County. And so that is where you've seen the biggest increases. And so it's not even across the whole state. So those are the people that really will benefit from this effort. It's also, I think, important to think about your own counties and to recognize that residential property tax represents about a third of property tax collected across the state from all sources, both locally and state assessed. And those numbers went down in 17 counties last year, 17 out of 23 counties, and a reduction of 6.5% statewide. So how are we going to make this up? What is the plan that this bill will reduce significant property tax collected at the state level or sent at the county level and sent back to the state? What's our plan to replace those? I haven't heard one yet.
Representative Worf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess that I stand here, listen to the debate. One thing that I look at, I look around this chamber, you want to talk about uniform. You know, we all come from very diverse backgrounds. Some of us have been in the legislature a long time, some of us are brand new. But what is uniform is how we're compensated for the services that we provide. And I guess that's the problem I've got. I look at the uniformity. That's one of the things that we've been told we can't determine. And I think what's more uniform than saying whatever you bought it for is what the tax is taxed on. I mean, I struggle to understand why that concept is hard to understand. If I bought it at that, I know that's what my tax rate should be at. What's confusing to me and what I think is unjust is because my neighbors sold their home for a higher rate, it impacts and increases my tax rate. That always works good if you can happen to sell your house on the up market. But I remember when I first started thinking about moving to Wyoming, my boss cautioned me about buying a home. He said, when the oil and gas bubble burst in my county, they had homes that were valued at over $1 million that they couldn't sell for $150,000. we had all kinds of homes that were left vacant. And so I don't believe that it's realistic to sit there and say that we're obligated to stay with the structure that we have right now. I think we can come up with something that's fair. You know what you bought your home for. I would imagine that there isn't one person here that couldn't tell me what they bought their home for and have the documentation to prove it. Now, I know I bought my house in 2000. I've gone through some floods. I've done some home improvements. All of that can be documented. I have all that, and I'm sure you guys do too. Maybe I'm just a hoarder, I don't know, but I think those important documents we all tend to hold on to. And the county tracks this. It's already been mentioned that that this is tracked through the title companies. The improvements are not. But I do believe the other point that I want to make is, we've been told that we can't determine constitutionality, that it's only the higher court that can make that determination. And I disagree. It's assumed that everything we're doing is in line with the Constitution. And it isn't changed unless somebody challenges that. And we have people that stand up and tell us they can declare it's unconstitutional, but we can't challenge the constitutionality of things. And so I think this body has the ability to do what we want. And I do think we have to justify it. But to me, to say that it's not uniform because not everybody's paying the same tax, to me, that's not what uniform is. Uniform means that it's assessed the same manner. And to me, what better way to assess that than what you paid? We all know what we paid. Let's tax what we paid, what we purchased it for, rather than what my neighbors purchased their house for, increasing my taxes. I urge an aye vote. Thank you.
Speaker Nyman.
Could not agree more. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And that's the issue that we've been dealing with. In my county up there right now, among several counties across the state, exponential increases in value of property. People coming from all over this United States to purchase land way above appraised value. So that's the issue that we're dealing with up there. Cash money from multiple states paying exorbitant prices far above. I had a story yesterday. Gentleman came to my office from one of the districts that starts with or one of the towns that starts with an M in the Park County School District. His daughter just bought a piece of property. She gave $500,000 for it. Thought they really did a great job. Bought a nice home and a small acreage. They were set on that price. Ladies and gentlemen, they went to the assessor, and the assessor then told them that because of recent sales, their property was now evaluated at $850,000. Immediately. And he asked me, he says, Chip, he said, how's that fair? He said, they just paid $500,000. They thought they'd done a really good job, set up their payments, knew what they were going to do. And he said, and because of somebody else's willingness to pay that much, he said, now they're going to be taxed at a higher level. I've been told by representatives that, you know what, you ought to be thankful. Now look at what you can borrow against. Look at the value that's increased. But when you talk to somebody that's on a fixed income or older folks, which I do have in my part of the country that have been there a long time, they don't have that option. Why would they want to leverage their property? Look at all this opportunity that they have to now on an increased value, which, and again, one of the other representatives said it very clearly. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a tax on unrealized income. You cannot get around that. That is exactly what this is. They have not realized the income unless they sell the property. So now they're going to have to come up with more dollars because someone else had the means to pay an exorbitant amount well above appraised value for their land. And they get thrown into it because of the LEA. Commercial's the same way. I have it in my community, small community. 5 separate commercial businesses sold in 1 year. I got phone calls off the hook, an immediate 40% increase in all commercial properties in that community. And they just have to absorb that. So to the point of the last person that just talked to you up here about it, how is it not fair to have a standard price that you're going to be able to pay, which I would almost ask, ladies and gentlemen, how would that not be the market value of the property if that's what the buyer and the seller came to an agreement and said that's what that property's worth? And we purchased it. And then we put an across the board, everybody's the same,
value that constantly increases in order to take care of our costs as we move forward. Why would that not be fair? If you want to come in and pay $1.5 million for a piece of property and you have the means and the ability to be able to do that, why should that increase my taxes? Because I was good and I paid attention and I did my due diligence and I worked to get my property bought at a reasonable price, and both of us were satisfied and we accepted the sale, the seller and the buyer. But because someone comes in next to me and decides that I have the means and the wherewithal to spend this much, I have just made your property more valuable, which means you're going to pay more taxes that you did not anticipate. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm glad to pay my taxes. I do. My taxes on my ranch have gone up 156% in the past 10 years. And I'm on ag, mind you, based on production value. And I'm glad to do that. 73 cents that go to education. I don't have any kids in school. I used to. I don't even have any grandkids in school. All four of my grandchildren are homeschooled. So I'm paying those taxes, plus they're also paying for their own education. But I do not think it is fair at all to say that just because you're in an area and somebody comes in and decides that your part of the country is really beautiful and that I'd like to live there, that suddenly the folks that have been there for a long time are going to be asked to pay an exorbitant amount of increased taxes based on what someone else is willing to pay. If you're going to pay that much, then by all means, you understood that going in, then you're going to pay your taxes based on what you're willing to pay. But I don't believe it is fair that my taxes should have to be raised because of what you are able to do. Fairness would be, let's put it all at the same level, raise everybody at the same rate, but if you want to pay more for your home, then be ready to pay more in taxes. It shouldn't drag me up with you because I don't want to sell my place, and why would I need the extra value to leverage to be able to stay in my place? It's a very real issue. And to say that, and it's not an effect on young people, to the point of the Good Bringer, young people would love to be able to know that they have a consistent level that they're going to be paying. Because as all of us know, we didn't know from one day to the next until this last session when we locked it in at 4%. Heaven knows what you were going to pay next year. It depended on what somebody else next to you was willing to pay. It shouldn't be that way. It should be consistent. And it should allow us the latitude to be able to stay in our homes and have an average, normal, reasonable increase to pay for the costs of goods and services that we need to have to make our areas grow. So on and for this, I think this is a structural change that we need to embrace. And the greatest journey begins with a single step. So ladies and gentlemen, they didn't realize when they put the current system in place that everybody in the world was going to want to run to Wyoming when things got crazy in other locations. And because of the way we structured it, that's what's making this thing fly. Well, if they're all wanting to come here, then let's let those that want to come here help pay that cost. And not overtax the folks that have been here. Let's keep it even. Let's let it climb evenly. On and for this.
Representative Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, the first comment I would have to the last speaker is we just passed the 4% cap. So that's exactly to take care of the problems that the good speaker was just, and our good speaker was just talking about. So we took care of that problem in this body last year, just like that. But let's go back and have a little closer look at this bill. How many of you understand what this bill really does and what the effect is going to be on you? I'll bet you less than 10% really understand the full impacts. And frankly, we don't know the full impacts because they're all broad estimates. We simply don't know. The only thing we can go by is what's happened in that good state on the West Coast that did the same thing. And guess what? Their property taxes went up overall as a result of Prop 13. So as much as you can say that let's keep our property absolutely flat based upon values, that's not what happens because houses turn over. And we have probably the best ag tax in the United States. It really does save our ag properties. I mean, our ranch back home has less taxes than my home does here. And that's a nice thing, but it's also a beacon to have rich dollars come in and buy up our property, our ranch lands, because they get that same benefit. So that's just the way of the land. So let's talk a little bit about the constitutional question. The concept is that it's not unconstitutional until we're told it's not, is kind of remarkable to me. It seems that all of us stood up with a good speaker in front of us and we swore an oath to the Wyoming Constitution and do our best to interpret it and listen to those folks qualified to interpret it. So the idea that we'll roll the dice and try to figure out, I don't think is our responsibility. Our responsibility is to read the Constitution and find out whether or not it's fair and just and equitable, this particular tax especially. So when I bought that little home in California, my next door neighbor paid 1/3 of the property taxes I paid because she'd lived there for 45 years since prop was passed in 74. 1/3 of what I had to pay. And I don't think that was fair, that I had to, because I was paying, and other people, new folks that came in were paying the shortage because she didn't pay her fair share because we have inflation. Prices go up, everything goes up, groceries go up, wages go up. The idea that we're going to freeze property taxes, well, frankly, it ignores reality. And what happened to the mantra of many of those folks in here is that let's let private industry or let capital and let our constitutional system work. And let's not use government to come in and tell us how to live, work to do, and who pays what. That's the free market enterprise, ladies and gentlemen. And we just happen to live in it. And now we want to gild it down to make the next generation pay the bills. That's what this is really doing. So, on and against.
Representative Harshman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate the great debate. Just a couple questions I heard asked. I just want to make sure get the answer. The first, I think, was about that board that was taken out in your committee of the whole amendment and why they were taken out of this bill, and if it was somehow related to their testimony at when the bill was in committee. I still don't know what the cost is. If I read the fiscal note, it gives that example of another bill, 270 million. Maybe it's less than that. And then my third question is, for all of us who've lived in this state our entire lives, what happens when your property value goes down? I think in my town, in my county, we've ridden that boom and bust. My house was sold twice as much, went down in value. My property taxes went down. I've looked at several of your property tax bills around the state. You can get on your local treasurer and look at each other's tax bill. Many of your property taxes have ridden that up and down thing. Just as recent as, the 2017, there were no U-Hauls in my town. Crashed. Early 90s in my town, 600 vacant properties. So what happens with the value of the property goes down? I don't see this following it. It looks like it stays at your acquisition. So if you bought high and you lose, then you're paying on an inflated value. So I think that's a problem with it. I've heard from one person from California actually wrote me a while back on this issue, and they said a couple of things. First of all, they were trapped in their home. Their kids had left. They're in this big old home. They wanted to downsize. They couldn't because their property taxes would be more in a smaller place that they'd have to buy at a different deal. And then the person talked about how you can't really add on. You can't really make improvements. And then he said, the good thing, though, you have everlasting life because nobody dies in California. You just transfer it on. No, the property never gets sold. You just transfer it. And I think this bill provides for that everlasting transfer of this property to the next person from a trust to a family member, so it never gets revalued. So that's my comment. And then finally, the last comment. So I had 3 questions, 2 comments. Was brought up here, property tax is the oldest tax in the world. It was the first tax in our country when we became a country in the 1790s. It was actually in our state at territorial days. There are more modern ways to tax. I got a little bill for you. And you can go to a consumption tax. We started that in this state in 1935. We started property tax 1869. So there are ways to do that. So with that, I just think following the Constitution on this fair and equal treatment. Last little piece. 3 levers on property tax. I've done a fair amount of my life on property taxes. The first is valuation. That's what this bill tries to do, valuation. Okay, the other one is the number of mills. Okay, we have mills frozen at the state level. So many states, locals can adjust mills up and down. The people that could lower property taxes this afternoon are your county commissioners. They could lower them right now. They could reduce mills right now. 2 counties have already done that. So valuation, we do 9.5% right now on full value. This proposes to change that. I would tell you though, our system is considered one of the best in the country on valuation, fair and equal valuation. And then finally, assessment rate. We passed a constitutional amendment to allow us to change a residential assessment rate. There's a bill coming from the other body that would give an 11% tax break, moving it from 9.5 to 8.3. That bill's on its way too. And that's fair and equitable. So we've already figured out the valuation piece. It was at 4%. Look at your tax bill. It saved all of us money. So we've done the valuation piece. Wyoming citizens are paying the fewest mills in modern state history. Average mill is 68. We don't pay for school CapCon now out at mills. You're paying the fewest mill levies ever in your history. And now we got a chance to lower the assessment rate. But this whole thing is, I guess I'm in a boom bust county. I want to know when the bus comes and my property tanks in half, why I'm still paying the same rate. Doesn't make any sense. Doesn't seem fair and equal. So again, I'm really for a consumption tax. And maybe I'm going to look at the title of this a little closer. I'm bringing an amendment on second reading, and we can get this problem actually solved for our people. And the last thing I'll leave you with, I challenge anybody to bring me the name of a person in your community that was evicted from their home for 4 years of not paying property taxes. Bring me the name of one person that their house was a tax sale out from under them and the new owner evicted them. I don't know of any. I'm sure it's happened, but I've lived here my whole life and I don't know of one. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and please vote no on this bill.
Representative Wasserberger.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just to give a quick summary, ladies and gentlemen, one thing to kind of give a nice quick summary on this is we don't tax on unrealized gains in the stock market. So why would we tax on unrealized gains in the real estate market? I mean, this is going to be a simple thing that's just going to even out the playing field for a lot of people, just like it has in other markets. As far as some of the arguments I've heard of people not being able to afford stuff, well, right now, you know, as a millennial, I really can't afford real estate. So, I mean, this is going to be something that prevents people from losing their homes. You know, I've talked to a lady in my district. She's got 2 kids working full-time jobs, and she's working a full-time job so they can keep their house. This is going to be something that solves the problem for that young family. Thank you. That's all I have to say. I'm in support of this bill.
Anything? No. Representative Locke, you have anything?
Thanks, everybody, for the conversation. And I asked for your vote, but I'll shut up.
All right, and just a gentle reminder, I'm the chairman, I'm not the speaker, so I heard that a few times, and that wasn't directed towards you, Representative Locke, just in general, so. All right, let's see here. Okay, I've heard the question being called. All those in favor of Vice Chairman Stivar's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it does so with the recommendation that House Bill 262 do pass, 282 do pass. All those in favor
please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. No. House Bill 282 has passed committee of the whole. Division being called. All those in favor, please stand. Plus me. Okay. You can sit and that, all those opposed, please stand. All right. House Bill 282 has passed committee of the whole 35 to 22. Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the Committee of the Whole begs leave to rise and sit again at 3 p.m.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Committee announcements. Chairman Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Your committee number 8, Transportation, Highways, and Military Affairs, will meet in 15 minutes to consider 3 bills, House Bill 179, House Bill 210, and House Bill 310.
Thank you, Chairman Brown. Chairman Washit.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Your committee number 1 will meet at 7 o'clock tomorrow morning, getting even with all the rest of you hard chargers. We'll consider House Bill 329, Office of Homeland Security Amendments, House Bill 102, Attorney General elected, House Bill 280, Sex Offender Registration, House Bill 194. We've closed public comment, but the committee will be working the bill.
Any further committee announcements? Chairman Bear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Your committee number 2, Appropriations, will meet upon noon recess tomorrow. That is February 5th at Capitol Room E301 and online to discuss House Bill 274, Biological Males in Women's Sports as a re-referral, House Bill 101, Forest Health Grant Program 3, House Bill 292, Budget Reserves recommended appropriation amount, continued from yesterday, House Bill 320, Taxation and Revenue Task Force 2028 as time permits, and any re-referrals as assigned.
Chairman Byron.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Your committee number 6, Travel, Recreation, Wildlife, Cultural Resources, will meet in 15 minutes, committee 15 minutes in E005 and online to hear House Bill 136, House Bill 299, and House Bill 286.
Chairman Heiner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Your committee number 9, Minerals, will meet tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. to finish with House Bill 192, which is fire mitigation and risk, and we'll finish up with 209, which is low carbon reliability.
Chairman Knapp.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Your Corporations Committee number 7 will meet upon noon recess tomorrow in E005 to hear House Bill 249, runoff elections, House Bill 296, constitutional apportionment, and House Bill 144, County Canvassing Board. We'll meet further upon adjournment to hear House Bill 262 and House Bill 215.
All right. Seeing no further committee announcements, we'll come back at 2 o'clock. 3 o'clock. Right.